Okay, I guess we're going to go ahead and start. I'm Jamie Groce. I'm the technical manager from MetroEast Community Media. I'm also a pilot, and I do have a rating for unmanned aerial systems, so I can fly a drone commercially. So, and that's what this is about today, drones. So we have one. There's a lot of them out there. A lot of people are buying them. They're very popular. There's two different types of operation. There's hobby and there's commercial. The rule is if you're being paid to do it, that is a commercial operation. That's just the way it is. If your employer is paying you or someone else is paying you, you're being paid to operate it, and that is a commercial operation. The rules are different for hobby and commercial, but as far as the drones are concerned, if you have a drone that weighs a little over ½ a pound, less than 55 pounds, it has to be registered with the FAA. So, and just an overview of this, all of this stuff is done basically on the honor system. In other words, they expect people to be honest about it. Most of flying is done on the honor system. If I go out to the airport to get into my airplane, there's nobody there who wants to see my pilot's license. Nobody's going to ask me if my medical certificate is current. They're not going to ask me if if I've had a biennial flight review in the last 2 years. It is on the honor system, and that's the way it works. The caveat with that, of course, is if something bad happens, if there's an accident, and you're involved in it, and you didn't have all these ducks lined up, you're going to be in trouble. And it's basically going to be the same thing with drones. There are no drone police out there looking to catch people flying drones unless you're irritating somebody with your drone. But if you have something go wrong with your drone and it falls to the earth and hits somebody or something, then there's going to be trouble. The information that your drone collects is delivered to the company that manufactured your drone, and they have all the information about where and when it is flown. And if somebody finds out that something bad happened and you're responsible for it, you're going to be in trouble, especially if you weren't following the rules. So if you're doing it for any type of business purposes, whether it's a profit or non-profit or whatever, you need to have insurance. Your insurance company needs to be aware that you're operating a drone, and then you need to follow all the rules for operating that drone. It's like anything else. If you're operating your car without a license and you get into an accident, the insurance company is going to say, well, we're not going to pay for that. That's your problem, not ours. So you have to follow all the rules in order to be safe. But again, it's on the honor system, and as long as you don't get caught, whatever. No. So there's a myriad of rules associated with airspace and the FAA, and of course the reason for that is that all air traffic that flies in and out of airports and between airports and everything else has to be kept separated and safe, and make sure they don't run into each other, and that people are doing things the right way. Drones don't generally fly as high as airplanes do, but most of them can. So if you do something like that, you could interfere with the air traffic system. So there are rules for flying drones. Is you're not ever supposed to fly it above 400 feet, period. And you're not supposed to fly it in restricted airspace, which there's restricted airspace all over the place. And we are in restricted airspace here. This is the Portland Airport's Class C airspace, and it runs from the surface of the ground up to 4,000 feet. So operating a drone outdoors here would not be permitted. I mean, it would be illegal. You certainly could do it. Again, it's the honor system, but it would be an illegal operation. So The radius is 5 miles from the Portland airport to the surface. As you get out further, you know, people liken the airspace around an airport to like an upside down wedding cake. In other words, there's a circle at the bottom that's 5 miles from the airport. As you get up higher, the circle extends out further, but it doesn't necessarily go all the way to the surface. So like for instance, over Gresham, the Portland airport, the ceiling for the airspace is like 1,700 feet. So it starts at 1,700 feet above the ground and goes up to 4,000 feet above sea level. So, you know, it's okay to fly a drone in Gresham, but you can't be in Troutdale's airspace, which covers a lot of Gresham. So that's another restricted area. You can get waivers to fly in those areas. You have to apply for a waiver 90 days in advance, and you have to explain, you know, what area you're going to be operating in, how you're going to do it safely, and they will give you a waiver. The FAA will give you a waiver to operate, and it can actually be from as long as 4 years, a period of as long as 4 years for that waiver if you need it. So, but, and they may put restrictions on it, and they may have questions about what you're doing, and whoever applies for it has to give them a phone number where they can reach you and stuff like that. So, all right, we should probably just have Tony fire up the drone and make some whoopee with it.
Tony Drony.
Or do you want to play the video? It's either one you can do.
Well, I'll do the drone first.
Okay.
I think I just
Tony's mic is awfully loud again, B.
just need to get this connected with the system here again. You can see it. Okay. Showing up? Okay, great.
Let me get you some slack there, Tony.
Okay. All right.
Do it off camera so they can't see the wires.
Oh. Looks like we may have to swap the battery. Okay, just a moment. Let's take a second here to swap
Tony
this
is
out.
one of our more experienced drone pilots. He's, although I have the certificate for operating the drone, I do not necessarily fly it myself. I'm responsible for its operation. In other words, Tony's going to be operating the controls, but the pilot in command is the person that has the certificate, and they are responsible for what he does with the drone. So don't do anything bad with the drone, Tony. The drone itself will, when it finds out where it is, it's going to tell us that it's in restricted airspace, and we're not supposed to fly it in restricted airspace. Fortunately, none of the indoor airspace is covered by the FAA rules, so you can fly a drone indoors no matter where you are. The FAA refuses to control airspace indoors. So, there's a question over there.
Are there any FCC regulations regarding broadcasting from drones yet that we should be aware of?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't have any information about FCC rules. There's nothing that the FAA regulates as far as the transmission of video and stuff, and the FCC is a whole different department, so I don't have any information on that. Well, obviously the drone is being controlled and it's transmitting video and it's using radio frequency to do that. So all of that stuff is obviously within the rules, and that's not an issue. I think, probably what the idea is, especially with the FCC, is depending on what the power output of the transmission is and which frequencies you're using, that's going to be a different animal. So.
I think we're good to go.
you're seeing the drone, I believe,
Yeah,
sitting on
it's
the
all-
ground,
it's all-
and Tony's about to turn it into a decapitation device. So everybody hold on to your hats.
Tony, do you want me to go over the interface after you fly?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Provides air conditioning too.
So, and you can see by the picture what the drone is seeing. And, you know, it's easy for a person who's operating a drone to stare at the screen rather than the surroundings of the drone. And if you get tunnel vision, you certainly want to have somebody else keeping an eye on what the drone is doing so they can tell you it's getting close to something or something bad is about to happen. So, I think the maximum range for control on the drone is 4 miles, but the rules are that you have to keep the drone in sight, in line of sight for you. You can't let it go someplace around the other side of a building where you can't see what it's doing. Unless you have somebody over there that's watching to see what it's doing, you can't do that. So, and you can see they do a good job of hovering and keeping their position. They're not extremely difficult to operate or anything like that. Most of the operations are automated, so it can hold its position. It can go back to a position that you programmed as its home base all by itself. You know, it has safety features on it. I'll let Tony talk about all that stuff when we're done talking about the rules and regulations. So I think everybody knows what drone shots look like, but we also have some video that we can show you. Let's go ahead and land it.
You didn't decapitate it.
No, he was pretty nice with it today. He's, you know,
No free haircuts today.
yeah, no harassment with the drone today. So,
Can you tell us a little about this one?
I'm gonna let Tony tell you the ins and outs of
Okay.
you know drones and which models. I just want to finish up the safety stuff first. There are when you're about to fly a drone, any drone, before you fly it, you should make sure that it's safe to fly. In other words, do a pre-flight check on it. Nothing's loose on it. Everything is the way it should be. The manufacturers for each drone have a series of items that you should check before you fly it, and you should check all those things before you fly it. You wouldn't want to get on an airplane with a pilot who hadn't done a pre-flight check on the airplane and made sure everything was correct, and it had enough oil in it, and enough fuel, and everything else. So, same thing for a drone. You only fly them in daylight hours, which are considered 30 minutes before sunrise and 30 minutes after. You can go to 30 minutes after sunset, and that information is available from your weather app or whatever other app you have that can tell you that. But and speaking of weather, you want to be sure that you understand what kind of conditions are going to affect the particular drone that you're flying, and what is your limitations as far as winds. The limitations for visibility is 3 statute miles, so if you can't see 3 miles, you shouldn't be operating your drone under those conditions. It requires, the drone requires somebody to operate the drone, and somebody and a visual observer to make sure that that safety is being observed and that the drone isn't going to fly into anything else. And it also has to be somebody there who is qualified and has a certificate for the unmanned aerial systems from the FAA. Again, and it's very important to keep it in line of sight, so you're always the drone is always visible, so you always know what it's doing. And then there's something called crew resource management, which is always a good idea, that people know that the people who are operating the drone with you know what they're responsible for. They know what you're responsible for. You know how to communicate with each other. everybody is aware of the, the safety issues and, and talk over whatever flight you're going to do some pre-flight planning, make sure everybody understands where you're going to be flying it, what you're going to be doing with it, that people are aware. You have to have permission from a property owner. If you're on private property, you need to have their permission to operate it on their property, and you should make sure all those things are taken care of before you do your flight. And again, the highest altitude you're supposed to fly the drone at is 400 feet above the surface. You are not to operate drones over crowds for obvious reasons. If something was to go wrong with the drone, if this drone has one motor fail of the 4 motors, it's not going to continue flying. It's going to drop. There's no controlling it with just 3 motors going. That doesn't work. So if you have some sort of a failure like that and you're over a crowd, somebody's going to get hurt. So we don't want that to happen. It's okay to take pictures of crowds, but not flying directly over them. Go ahead.
Are those blades like pretty heavy duty? Like if you stuck your hand in there, would it?
If you stuck your hand in there, you're gonna
get
cut
injured.
yourself.
I have a drone scar on my wrist.
Yeah, you don't want to stick your finger in there when it's flying. Tony put the guards on today because he was being nice, but you can fly them without the guards on, especially if you're outdoors, and obviously it makes it lighter, and so it can fly a little bit longer on the battery power. But other than that, it's a good idea to have them on, because if it was to hit a tree branch or something, that's going to take out a prop and down it's going to come. Sir, go ahead.
Back to crowds, is there a radius around crowds that
It's just not above the crowd. I mean, you can, yeah. So in other words, if it does fall out of the sky, you don't want it to land on somebody in a crowd where they can't get out of the way. Go ahead.
you talked about operating from private property. What about flying over private property? Is there an airspace requirement if you're in a residential neighborhood shooting something, or even in the downtown in a commercial neighborhood, if I fly over the Starbucks, am I over private property?
Well, people's private property doesn't cover the airspace above it. So yes, you can fly over people's private property. If you keep it in someone's private property, you could be, violating their rights in that, they didn't give you permission to do that. So, people are going to look at that and they're going to frown on that. It may not be illegal, but
So it's to fly over, it's a whole thing to just hover there.
right. But just out of courtesy, it probably makes sense to have permission to do it. Okay.
You talked about that 5-mile radius around the airport.
Yeah.
Are there other specific rules for like urban environments where you're supposed to fly them or not allowed?
There's lots of rules for airplanes about residential areas and stuff like that, but there aren't, rules like the same type of rules for drones. I guess the number one thing that comes to mind, though, is that it always has to be within your line of sight. If you take it somewhere beyond some trees and you can't see the drone, you're not supposed to be operating it like that. If you take it below the roof line of a house someplace, you're not supposed to be operating it like that. You're supposed to be able to see it line of sight all the time. Go ahead.
So what's the setup like that cost?
Well,
Tony?
the basic drone, I think, goes for about $1,300 or so. I think that there might have been a price drop. Maybe it's a little lower than that because they last fall DJI introduced a new model. This is the model. This is called the Phantom 4, and they put out a newer model last fall called the Phantom 4 Professional. And the difference is that it has a few more collision sensors on it to keep you safer. And also the camera's been updated. I think it has a larger sensor, and also it can record at 100 megabits in 4K mode as opposed to 60 megabits as this one records. So you get a little bit better image, a little bit better image quality from your recording, and it has some more obstacle sensors in more directions.
And so the control and the drone are part of the same package?
Yes. Now, it does not come with a viewfinder or an iPad. This is an iPad mini, and So you need either a cell phone, smartphone with a screen, or an iPad, something to act as a viewfinder and an interface for it. And so the app that runs this is free. It's called DJI Go, and it's available to download from the App Store. And it's a free app, and that gives you full control over the drone. It gives you information readout. Can we put is it possible to put the interface screen back up? Is it still connected? Okay, I'll see if I can get it connected here. All right. I have to move it over closer to the thing to see it.
Line of sight, huh?
Yeah, let's see if we can get it going
Gee
here.
whiz.
Amy, are there classes available to get certified through, like through a community college or something like that?
You know, I don't know about community colleges. I know that FBOs are places that offer flight lessons, you know, and I think I've seen some on the web too that offer, you know,
There we go.
just people that are offering classes to take for the certification. I can tell you the certification process is not anything daunting. It really is, you know, basic questions about how
Okay, here we go.
the operation of the drone and safety and that kind of stuff. And I think there's about maybe 40 or 45 questions on the test that you take, and they're all multiple choice. So,
Common sense stuff, really.
well, I mean, it's all the same stuff that we were talking about here today, the rules and regulations. They're going to ask you about airspace restrictions, and you do need to know that's the main thing that's covered in it is airspace, the FAA's rules on airspace and different types of airspace and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So how does MetroEast use this drone in its capacity?
We usually just use it to look in people's bathrooms and stuff. Because that's really the most interesting.
Smart
No.
smoking in the parking lot.
Currently, we haven't really used it for a MetroEast project, but we are planning on using it for some projects this summer. And I've applied for waivers in the areas that we're planning on using it because they're all areas that are within either Troutdale's or Portland's airspace. So we have to have waivers in order to,
Teddy bear picnic.
the parades,
Teddy bear parade.
yeah, parades and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a legal question. You get permission to fly over somebody's private property and residence, and they go, yeah, come on and fly. And something happens and you crash into their truck and crash through the windshield. They've given you permission. Is there a dual liability there, or has that ever come up?
I don't know that it's come up, but that's why you want to have insurance on your drone because obviously, you know, they're going to have homeowners insurance probably. You're going to have insurance on your drone. So the insurance companies can fight that out and make sure everybody's happy in the end. But again, if you don't have insurance, it's not going to, yeah, it's not going to be good. So
Tony,
Yeah,
would you be willing to go over the interface with us and kind of tell
Absolutely.
us about some of the features like the orbital shooting and the active tracking and
Sure.
that kind of stuff?
yeah,
I think some of the bells and whistles could be cool.
yeah.
I wonder if we could keep the drone up on the monitor for a little while he's doing that so people can see what he's.
There.
Okay, so this is the interface. This is available on both iPad, iPhone, and Android. So any of those devices, you can run this app. So you have the screen here. This sees what the camera sees. So if I move the camera, you can see that it's close to live. There's a little bit of latency with it, but other than that, it's pretty close to live. It outputs on the screen is a 720. The drone can record up to 4K digital cinema. So you can go UHD, which is 3840 by 2160, or up to 4096 by 2160 with the DCI frame.
So the SD card's on the drone.
Yeah, the SD card is actually a little thumbnail card, and it plugs right into the drone. We use 64 gig cards on it. You can use just about any card as long as it meets the speed requirement for the read and write. To be able to read and write, I think it's UHS1 is what it uses. Yeah, 3 UHS3. Okay,
Class
Great.
10.
class 10. Okay, so up in the corner, of course, this is manufactured by DJI. Right now it says safe to fly. which means that according to the drone, the environment and its own sensors and everything show that it's all good to go, that you can fly it safely within this area. So you have also GPS. We're deep enough in the building here where it's not picking up any satellites, so it's not going to go by GPS. It's just going to go by sensors and visual. You have a menu off to the side here, and the big red button is for recording. You also have a quick menu, setup menu for things like sensitivity and shutter speed. Right now I've got it cranked all the way up to 3200. You probably wouldn't want to shoot much that way, but you can bring it down. If you're outside, of course, you'll want less sensitivity. And I can close that. There's also a much more interesting menu where you can select your video size, your frame rate. Let's see what else here. You have your video format. You can shoot in AVC HD as well as QuickTime MOV files. You can set it to whether it's an NTSC or PAL-based system. White balance, just for now I have it in auto white balance, but you can set up indoor, outdoor, or custom white balances depending on your lighting conditions. The style of picture, it has a number of different styles that you can choose from, and colors. Color setup, right now I have it in Cine-Like D. If you're shooting inside, it's probably good to pick a standard like a Cine-Like D or one of the other. They have also have some black and white. They have vivid, one called Beach. I found with doing outdoors, I really like the D-Log, and the D-Log gives you a very flat response. It's a very flat, very desaturated response. It's very low contrast, but in return for that, you get an ugly looking original picture, but you can create a dynamite output from it by bringing it in and using a color grading program like if you're in Adobe Premiere, it would be the Limetry color corrector, color grader. In Final Cut, the new Color Finale has a lot of the same tools to work with the high bit images. So you can bring this in, and this gray washed out image can be turned into a really vibrant, beautiful picture where you are able to maintain shadow detail as well as highlight detail. So instead of having to choose with something closer to like Rec 2020 or such, where you're taking a narrow contrast range and you're deciding whether you want to underexpose it to get the highlights or overexpose it to get the shadows. This, you can get a lot wider range. You can get many more stops of range, and you can bring that ungraded picture in and grade it and really make it pop. So it gives you a lot of latitude.
Go ahead.
Jamie?
Yeah.
So you were already a certified pilot
Oh.
anyway, so this was automatically granted, this level.
No, I had to take the test.
You had to test for that.
I had to take the test and pass it.
Okay.
Yeah, you still have to pass the test.
So we've been looking here at like buying maybe several of these and making them available for checkout, just like we would camera equipment. So that would mean that every person that checked it out would have to be certified.
No.
You'd have to.
Well, only if it's, if they're doing it as a hobby, they're not being paid for it.
Yeah, I talked to the FAA drone desk about it, and they sent me from one desk to a specialist, and they said, yeah, we're real clear about this, dude, that even though, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that whoever owns the drone has to be responsible for its use. And so if you're loaning it out to somebody, I mean, the drone is registered, and so
Right.
whoever is loaning it out is responsible for its use. I still, if the drone is registered, I don't think they ask you to register it as a commercial drone. As I recall, they just ask you to.
Yeah, they have it. It's a choice.
Oh, it
Yeah.
is a choice.
On the front of the
Okay.
website, you have to decide whether it's going to be used for hobby use
Okay.
or for commercial
Okay,
use.
yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you register it for hobby use, you can't use it for commercial use. If you register it for commercial use, it has to be used somebody has to be with it who's qualified to operate it, so.
Does that also mean that you cannot use it for hobby use at that point?
You know, it's not necessarily clear in the rules about that, but I mean, I guess if I wanted to use it for hobby and I wasn't being paid, I can do that. And again, it's still, like I say, all of this stuff is still on the honor system. And as long as I'm already insured for it and all that kind of stuff, I guess I'd be comfortable operating it, you know, as a hobbyist as well as doing it commercially. You know, again, unless something goes wrong, nobody's, you know, standing behind you watching you. You know, they're not looking over your shoulder. So, go ahead.
You talked about the issue of private property. What about public parks? Is that, you know, like where the city owns?
Well, if the city has a rule about it, that's, you know, something you need to find out about. I don't think most cities have rules like that yet, but certainly with a lot more drone use happening, people are going to, you know, start making, especially if people do stupid things with them, then people are going to start making regulations to cover that kind of stuff. So, go ahead.
Hey, I got a couple questions. One is in regards to the FAA waiver. Is there a fee for that?
No.
And for the application as well, is there?
No. Oh, for the drone operating certificate, there is a, I think there's a, if you're a pilot, there's no fee. But if you're just taking the test, I think you're going to have to pay, not necessarily the FAA, but whoever is giving you the test and, you know, and that kind of stuff.
My second question is there a way when you're operating it and say you come up with a flight pattern, even if it's like, for instance, inside of a building and you're filming a scene, is there a way to record that flight pattern so you could so whatever you're recording on could actually do that same flight pattern over again without you controlling it? I mean, you can monitor it, but is there a way that, I mean, is it?
Yeah, I've never tried that myself. I think most of those recordable flights are based on GPS positioning. So I know that can be recorded in a GPS system indoors. I don't know if I can answer that because that's something I haven't tried. I've only flown it manually indoors.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, there's, you know, certain different drones are going to have different features too. I mean, there's, you know, if you look at the features for this particular drone, they're going to be different from the other, you know, drones. The one they have one that's, you know, the Mavic Pro or whatever, that's a little bit smaller than this one, but it has some features that this one doesn't have. You know, so depending on what features you're looking for, you probably can find it somewhere. Well, again, the drone itself is keeping track of its position via GPS. So it has its own built-in GPS. And, you know, it certainly is recording that information. Now, whether it can follow it back, you know, that's something you'd have to look into. I wonder if while we have that up, if we could get that screen up again, and then we could go to the app that shows you what airspace you're in and the weather and all that kind of stuff. Because DJI also makes an app for telling you where you're at and what the weather conditions are like in that particular area at the time and things like that. I don't know where Irvington, USA is, but I'm pretty sure we're not there. Oh yeah, I guess this is the Irvington neighborhood, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where we are. I guess it's and it says caution. And I'm not sure what I guess if you touch the caution, maybe it tells you something else.
Yeah.
No fly zone.
Okay. So, yeah, so if you go to the map, which is the far left at the bottom, it'll show us where we are and that we are inside a no-fly zone.
So does that relate to the airport?
I think the one that we're looking at isn't actually, if you touch it, it tells you what it's related to. Tony, if you touch that area. It says, yeah, so it is within the Portland International Airport. And it's also, there's a temporary flight restriction in the area for some sort of a game that's going to be going on apparently tomorrow from 5 until 9. So,
Civic Stadium has an outdoor soccer game or something.
okay.
What, is it possible to zoom out and see what the center is of that
Yeah.
circle I'm looking at?
Go ahead and zoom it out, Tony.
Yeah, it's the Civic Stadium.
So the lighter colored brownish one is the Portland airport. The darker colored one is, I think, probably the Pearson Air Park in Vancouver. And then that gray area is the temporary flight restriction over the Portland. Probably the Civic Stadium or
Yeah.
whatever is
There's a soccer game.
whatever is going to be down there. Yeah. If you zoom out farther, you'll see other restricted areas around here. Go ahead and zoom out a little bit.
Wow.
So now we're seeing all of the
Aurora.
yeah. So you can see Hillsborough, Forest Grove. There's 2 airports out there. One called Fly for Fun. There's the Hillsborough Airport. There's one in Camas. There's Troutdale. You know, so they're kind of all over the place.
Some series of Venn diagrams over there.
Yeah.
Does that waiver you're talking about, you said could last up to 4 years, can that cover an area, or does it have to be specific to like, on this day at this park, I'm gonna shoot this? Or could it be like the city of Salem or something?
It couldn't be the city of Salem. It couldn't. They're going to ask you for exact coordinates, and then they're going to say, is it within 1 to 2 nautical miles of that, 3 to 4 nautical miles? You know, they give you a circular area around a set of coordinates. So.
So what's the difference between the gray and the orange?
The orange ones are all airports. The gray one is a temporary flight restriction ordered by the FAA. So the gray would be a no-fly zone for airplanes as well as drones. A temporary flight restriction is, you know, like say the president's going to be in town. There's going to be a temporary flight restriction over the Portland-Vancouver area, and you're not going to be allowed to fly a plane without a flight plan that's been approved. You're not going to be allowed to fly drones in that area. And the nice thing about this particular program is it gives you that information. It tells you that there's a temporary flight restriction and when it is and what the hours of it are. There are also things like military training areas. You know, if you look at a sectional chart, which is available from many different sources, they're good for about 6 months. This is the Seattle area, which covers Portland. It shows you all the airspace in these areas and which airspaces are covered, you know, by, it has color coding of airspaces, and it has a legend that tells you what the airspace is. But there are certain areas where you can never fly an airplane, like for instance, well, that would be one.
Yeah. Isn't there a bombing range on 84
There,
east somewhere in Umatilla?
there is a bombing range up by Yakima, but there is a restricted area in the Boardman area
Yeah,
for stuff like that too. So.
Quick question. Are all the ranges the same size, or do they vary by size of the airport? Like for a regional airport, would it be a smaller area as opposed to an international airport?
Well, the other parts of the airspace, the part around the airport itself is always going to be a 5-mile radius. Okay?
That's any airport.
It's not any airport. Some airports do not have, you know, some airports, just the airport itself is in this class of airspace. But there are a lot of airports that do have, it depends on what type of operations take place at the airport. If the airport has, say for instance, an instrument landing system, then it would have to have protected areas for people using that system to be able to be guided through without having to be concerned about other air traffic. So it would be controlled by some agency, you know, while people are using that system. So, any other questions?
licensees to film with them?
Yeah, if you were a hobbyist, you would have to get permission from those, whichever ones cover that area that you're going to be in. All of them you'd have to have permission from. It's probably almost never more than 2. But for instance, the temporary flight restriction, you're not going to be able to get permission to operate in that area. But it's only from whatever time, it was like 3 p.m. until 6 p.m. tomorrow night. Then it's gone. So it isn't in effect right now. It's in effect tomorrow from, it says the time, it says the date and the time it's in effect from. Go ahead, Seth.
I'm fixated on the features. The tap to fly, could you explain like the tap to fly, and the waypoint setup? You know how you can like set up waypoints and things, and then the track, how you can track a person with it?
Yeah, there are some features on here that allow you to do a lot of different things. There's a tap to fly, which is on the interface. Basically what it does is it allows the drone to auto takeoff. So if you, instead of actually using the sticks to start the motors and get it off the ground, the auto takeoff will take care of that. And it'll bring it up to, I think, a height of about 4 feet. And then you can take it over from there. There's also, I think, an auto landing thing. I usually handle it manually. I prefer, if I'm responsible for it, that I want to be in control of it rather than relying on a lot of automatic features. And there are some features that I have yet to try with it, just because you know, we have restrictions on where we can fly it, and the weather hasn't been exactly accommodating lately. The drones and water don't mix really well, so with the kind of rainfall that we've been getting, it's not really conducive to drone flying. So unless it can be done indoors, then there's just some things that we can't do right now until the weather gets better and we are in an area that we have permission to fly.
In using this for our television work, can you preset direction, altitude? In other words, I want to go to this point.
Yeah,
then I want to go here.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, you can set waypoints on it, so you can predetermine a flight path and have it carry out that flight path. Again, you want to make sure that that flight path is within an area where you can have full line of sight, that doesn't violate any airspace, any particular airspace requirements, and
we're recreating an emergency situation where we need an overhead shot, but we just want to be able to do a circumvental around it, and then maybe come back across the top of it and stop.
Yeah, you can put in an orbital point too. That can be set up, like Seth was talking about. You can have it track an object and orbit an object. For instance, you can have it if someone is walking. You see on YouTube someone walking across a field and the drone tracks them exactly. You can designate that form and it will do its best to recognize that individual or that object. And as long as that object looks familiar to it and its logic system, then it will maintain a track on that object. And sometimes, you know, if it's tracking someone walking across the field and they suddenly turn to a profile or something and it doesn't quite look like that shape to the logic system, it can lose track on that particular object. Then you'd have to relink that object to it to be able to track it. But yeah, there's a lot of features. There are other models of these. DJI makes a number of other models. Jamie mentioned the Mavic, and there's also a higher end model that's called the Inspire 1, and I believe now they have an Inspire 2 model out. And those have the props mounted at a higher level. In fact, they're on swing arms that operate as both landing gear and booms to hold the propellers. So when it's on the ground, the props are low, and when it takes off, this whole rig raises and sets the props above the camera's point of view, so that it's not possible to get the props within the picture. This one, if you have the camera pointed too level and you're moving too quickly, the props will lean into the top of the picture, and that's not a problem if you're shooting 4K but you're still outputting on 1080 you can have a kind of a frame of slop around the outside edge, maybe 10 or 20%, where within that 10 or 20%, you have like a safe action area. So if the props were to intrude within that, you could still crop that outside edge out and retain that center portion and scale it down to 1080 and output it that way. So that's one way to get around any possible prop intrusion into the picture. But the Inspire models, they can actually have it where you can have two controllers. You can have one that operates the drone itself, so the pilot can actually fly the drone and maneuver the drone and keep it in sight. And another person can operate the camera and have the viewfinder and be solely committed and focused on what the camera's doing. So you can have both operate a single drone. This one doesn't have that feature, but there are models that do, and other manufacturers that do.
I'm not sure what they're using on Grim, but there's always two operators, one's doing camera and one's doing that.
Yeah.
They predetermine paths.
Yes.
So they can go back and do it again if they need to.
Correct.
And then tracking is amazing, because they had an accurate turn like that and they thought it was going to throw it off, but it recognized the parallelity.
Mhm.
It worked out really well.
Yeah, there are a number of different models. Drones are not limited to quadcopters. You can get octocopters with up to 8
There's one that
engines.
hanging on to it, and it took him a prop. about this big around.
I wouldn't be surprised.
4 or 5 of them.
Yeah, yeah. But they make them. They actually make them to where they can heavy lift digital cinema cameras, DSLRs, and such. So
I dare it to try to lift me.
yeah.
I like it.
But yeah, there are many models out there. We went with DJI and the Phantom series in particular because it's the one that's probably in most systems use that. I mean, from looking around, I did some research ahead of time, and most people seem to use the series of Phantoms. I like the Phantom 4, and my coworker Seth and we both researched it and looked at different packages and different abilities. This particular model has some safety features built in, some sensors that allow you to track, like this floor is fairly plain in here. It's neutral gray. So when it was hovering, there was a little bit of drift, and I had to correct for that drift because it could not read a definable pattern on the floor. But if you're in a situation either inside or outside, it has a sensor that looks straight down, like a camera that looks straight down, and it identifies patterns. And so if you want it to maintain a stable position, even within certain degrees of wind gusts and things like that, it will be a very, very stable platform because it's looking at the ground. Right. And it from what I understand, the sensor will enlarge a portion of the ground so it looks like a QR code, where it looks at a certain group of pixels as blocks, and it tries to keep itself positioned over this particular block of pixels.
So if you were to say, make an X with tape on the floor over here, that was a different color than the floor, it would have that to look at, and it would just be rock solid while it was hovering.
Yeah.
Flying over water, a pond or something like that, causing problems?
It could, yeah. There are reflections and glare and things like that could affect it. Now, with the camera itself, you can get a number of accessory filters for it. They make polarizing filters and in particular ND filters, so you can stop it down. So you're not having to, because the only other way to really reduce the exposure, other than, you can take the exposure index down to 100, but depending on the lighting conditions, you may have to have an extremely high shutter speed in order to keep the exposure within a consistent level. And the ND filters, you can get different grades of ND filters that take away, 1, 2, 4, or 8 stops of light and really bring that light level down to a manageable level. So if you're shooting at 24p, you can have that shutter speed that's around a 50th to a 60th of a second to give you a more natural look and natural blur, so it's not strobing when it's moving.
Are there separate batteries for the camera operation and the rotor operation, or are they all off of one battery?
The drone has its own type of battery. The flight time with a fully charged battery, with current models, it's close to about 28 minutes. 25 is probably pretty safe for that.
With the 64 gig chip, how much time is that?
It depends. It all depends on which mode you're shooting in, and the bit rate and stuff like that. The DCI 4K, of course, would probably consume more space than UHD, and UHD would consume 4 times the amount of space and reduce your recording time probably over HD. Now the bit rate has a lot to do with that, so it may not be that great of difference, because I think the bit rate is fairly consistent, so it probably would affect the compression level of the image, well, probably more so even than the length of time that you can record.
It's something you can do in pre-production to find out.
Right, and I think there is a guide out there. I think it's even within the manual where it shows estimated recording times with different media and different sizes of media, so that can give you a good estimate on that. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I know that they have those charts out there for it.
Do you want to show the video real quick?
Sure, yeah. Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to try to connect here the laptop on the screen. Okay, there we go. So I have a collection of clips from a mixture of sources, just to give an example of some drone footage, and then there's a piece where I can show you the result of color grading on a D-log. So I'll go ahead and play that clip. This is an interior shot, and this is a local facility that has never been used, an incarceration facility. It's never been opened. It was built years back. I don't know why this is strobing. It's probably just the Wi-Fi. But this aerial of a mosaic. It's coming off the system, but it might just be challenged to go through the actual pictures. The movement is smoother than what it shows here. But these are some examples of moving camera. And again, you can use it. It makes a really smooth dolly. I mean, very smooth dolly, a very smooth jib, a very smooth crane. So you can do moves that resemble traditional grip gear type moves, like a crane or a dolly, and can give you a lot of flexibility.
Somebody called it some kind of a noise suppression.
Oh,
Yeah, and now the drones, they don't record audio, so all of your footage is MOS. It's without any sound recording.
Ground picking up the noise of the drone sitting out here about
Sure.
40 feet away, picking
Yeah.
up the background. If there's some kind of suppression software out there.
There may be, yeah.
Specifically address ground noise.
well, you know it would be a specific frequency, so it is something you probably would be able to get removed from after the fact, because it's a specific frequency.
Recording of it and then match it up to whatever those frequencies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And here's an example of, this is ungraded D-log, so you can see it's kind of low saturation, kind of a little bit washed out and gray, and here is the same shot again, graded.
Wow.
You can see that, you can see in the shadows and you can see the highlights, but they're not, neither one is blown out. So there's some really good, I'll just let this play again. No, okay.
Not
But,
anymore.
not anymore. All right. So, yeah, the original, if you look at the original, this is the D-log profile, and it's great for shooting outdoors, especially when this was set up, it was overcast, and then the sun came out briefly. And so all of a sudden, you were getting all these highlights and more stark shadows. And if you were in a standard profile, you would have to choose one over the other. You'd have to choose either to expose your highlights correctly and lose that shadow detail, or expose the shadows and blow out your highlights. But with a log, you're getting the raw data from the sensor. So whatever the sensor can see it's recording, and it records it in a very flat profile like that. So once you get it back and get it into post, then you can go through your color grading, and you can bring back your contrast, you can pop your color, and you can still see that you, even though you have full contrast, you have shadow detail, you have detail in your highlights, and the final image isn't blown out. It's just taking that whole range, and you're basically squeezing it back down, but it retains all of that detail.
This is what you were talking about yesterday when we were talking about compressing it down.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the same feature that's on a lot of new DSLRs and camcorders and digital cinema cameras shooting in a log profile. And it's really great. You get a lot of return. It's a little bit more post work, but you find that you can get through it pretty quickly. There are also LUTs available, which are lookup tables. So if you want a particular look on your footage, you can have a ready-made lookup table that automatically has a certain contrast level or a certain output level, like Rec 2020 or Rec 709, one of those profiles, and you can apply that, and it will automatically pop it down to where it looks like it was shot with a standard color profile. Or you can customize it. I mean, you can get LUTs for almost anything. You can even create your own. If you want it to look like it was shot day for night and it was shot with bright moonlight, you can put that on there, and it'll give it a blue wash. You can, make it look black and white. You can make it look like old film stock. There's all sorts of LUTs out there and custom LUTs that you can apply to it. And the LUTs are also customizable, so you can drop a LUT on the footage, and then you can still go in and do your own grade using the LUT as a foundation for your grade. So you have a lot of options.
Do you guys know about Pixel Film Studios' free LUT loader?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of great LUTs out there, and a lot of them for free. And there's a free version of DaVinci Resolve that you can get too, and you can create custom LUTs in that and save them and apply them. So there's, and I think also in I don't know, does Color Finale, does it allow you to create custom LUTs? I haven't played around with that enough to know, but Lumetri, you can do that. You can save customs. Yeah, but yeah, it's great to have that kind of ability to give you, so the video gives you a response more like you would see in a color film negative. And where the original is very low contrast, but you can make a fantastic print or an output from that.
Have you used or found a need to use any image stabilization with the software?
With the drone footage? Well, the drone has a gimbal on it here that as the drone moves, the camera stays incredibly stable. So other than panning it or pivoting it on a point, any motion that the drone makes is going to be compensated by the gimbal. So it's inherently stable. I imagine it's probably possible to depending on how you're flying it, to get some unwanted shake or something in there. But the whole system is very, very stable. The props are all properly balanced to begin with. It's a good idea to always check your propellers before you mount them to make sure that there are no nicks. I like to use the prop guards whenever possible, especially if I'm going to be around any people or trees or anything like that, because that can make the difference between it staying in the air and just getting bouncing off something and crashing to the ground when a prop gets caught and you lose that and you nick it. And propellers are inexpensive. It's always good to have a few extra pair around, but you want to make sure that you don't fly it if a prop has been damaged or anything, because that will introduce a vibration in it and it won't be as stable. So it's just good to, if you do get one, to have a few spare packs of propellers to go with it.
And just so we're all clear, if something goes wrong with the drone, they do not glide
No.
at all.
Flying brick.
Yeah, they fly exactly the way bricks don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flying brick.
Yeah.
No auto rotation.
Yeah.
No. Right to the ground.
Right.
Have you tried cropping in on 4K? Or actually, the first question I had was, does it have an optical zoom built in?
No. No, it's fixed. It's a prime.
Can you, I mean, you know, logically you can crop in a HD image out of the 4K, but how does that look?
It looks terrific. Yeah, the camera has incredible depth of field. It's a prime lens on it. It's a little bit more wide angle. It's not a fisheye, but it's got a pretty good wide angle of view. But you can go in and you can extract a really nice 1080 image out of it, and it'll look incredibly sharp. And the nice thing is, even if you're outputting 1080, is to have that ability to shoot in 4K and even create a frame. You can put your own frame markers. You know, you can take a piece of striping tape or something and put your own custom frame marker on what your safe area is. So, as I mentioned before, if the propellers intrude into the top of the picture, but you leave a safe zone outside of your wanted frame, you can cut away that additional material and extract maybe a 3K or a 2.7K image out, and then grab that and scale that down to 1080 and still have a really beautiful image. Yeah. And you can also up here, you can use it as a zoom in effect in post. So you can do a 2-to-1 push in on something. You can start out with a wide and do a 2-to-1 push in and still come out with an HD quality image.
You said 60 megabits a second?
60, yeah. This one, the professional, the newer model, has a little bit bigger sensor. I think it's a micro four thirds sensor on it.
Oh, wow.
And
Put micro four third lenses on?
well, I don't know about accessory lenses. You can have filters on it. There may be some types of lenses out there.
The Inspire Raw is
Yeah.
I think it's the name of the lens, is actually a micro four thirds lens.
Mhm.
Sony, I'm pretty sure, makes their optics, so they're pretty awesome.
Okay.
And I think the Inspire, you can have that lens, and there is an optical lens zoom.
Mhm.
I believe it's come out, or it is.
I think so. Yeah, yeah, for the Inspire. Yeah, but again, it depends on your budget. It depends on your application. But there are a number of models out there, and so there's always something to fit your need. If you need to lift a DSLR, then obviously you'll need something larger than this and heftier than this to be able to do that. But these are the most common ones in use. I think on the FAA site they actually list the percentages of the different models and makes that are out there, and the Phantom series is by far the most used out there commercially and for hobbyists. It's simply probably because they've been around the longest. They have the most R&D into the design. They seem to be ahead of the game on a lot of the features, and you know, they've just been at it the longest. They have the most experience. But again, it's whatever suits your personal taste or your production or your requirements.
Have you ever tried putting little like flotation devices in the
I've seen it on YouTube. I haven't tried it myself.
And you don't want to
But-
get it wet.
No, no, no. Again, you know, like Jamie was talking about, you need to be aware of your weather conditions. Any electronic device doesn't really go well exposed to water, and the drone is no exception to that.
how weather sealed?
Oh,
It's not.
yeah, it's
not weather
fairly sealed, but still, it's not waterproof.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at the side of it, there's connectors, there's the card slot, you know, I mean,
Yeah, water will find a way to
Yeah.
get in. Yeah, definitely.
well, it's about time for us to wrap this up. Is there any more questions? All right, that's good then.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Oh, if anybody wants to look at a sectional chart, I do happen to have one up here if you want to just take a peek at it. I'll leave it open to the Portland area so you can see what it looks like.
But I noticed on the app, it is that